All righty then. And so let me bring us in here. Okay, here we go. President Donald Trump on Monday agreed to a 30-day pause on his tariff threats against Mexico and Canada as America's two biggest trading partners took steps to appease him over border security and drug trafficking. The 30-day pauses are a cool-down period that puts us at the cusp of a trade war that risked crushing economic growth, causing inflation, and ending alliances with the United States' I would say, two closest allies. I'm very pleased with this initial outcome, and the tariffs announced on Saturday will be paused for a 30-day period to see whether or not a final economic deal with Canada can be structured. Trump said, "Fairness for all," he said in all caps, whatever that means. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, posted the pause would occur while we work together, saying that his government will name a fentanyl czar, not a czarina, but we could have a czarina, list Mexican cartels as terrorist groups, and launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, and money laundering. What, no Space Force? The pause followed a similar move with Mexico that allows for a period of negotiations over drug smuggling and illegal migration. The 10% tariff that Trump slapped on China, however, is still going to go into effect this week, although Trump plans to talk to Chinese President Xi Jinping during the next few days, and the Chinese seem confident that they're going to be able to talk Trump off the ledge here. While the trade war was feared by investors, companies, and political leaders, now seems less likely to erupt. That doesn't mean that the drama is over. Canada and Mexico bought some additional time, but Trump could easily renew his tariffs and already wants to announce taxes on imports from the European Union. Remember when Europe was our ally? All of this leaves the global economy uncertain about whether a crisis has been averted or if possible catastrophe still looms. Joining us to talk about this is Aquiles Larrea. He's CEO and founder of Larrea Wealth Management. He's the author of the book, Your Money and You, The Ultimate Guide for Latino Entrepreneurs. Aquiles, thank you very much for joining us here on the TMI Show.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you. So, Aquiles, do you think, what do you think is going to happen at the end of let's start with Canada and Mexico. 30-day pause, is it going to be extended? Or is it just going to, is there going to be some sort of agreement here? Or could we still be staring down the barrel of some tariffs?
Anything's possible at this particular point. I think that the 30 days gives them a little bit more time to, hey, let's slow down a little bit. Let's open the channels of communication, which is never a bad thing. And at the end of the day, isn't this about money? Because that's what it feels like to me. You know, are we going to get a bigger slice of the pie and render unto the U.S. what is the U.S. at this particular point? That's my opinion on this at this particular point. I think that at long term, in terms of an agreement on tariffs, let's go on the positive side first. We come to an agreement at the 30th day, or we extend it out 60 more days, and we keep the lines of communication open, then that's going to be a boom to us, because that means Canada and Mexico are saying, hey, we're open to the possibility. Let's see what we can do together without us, meaning Canada and Mexico, losing our sovereignty, not feeling like we are part of a deal. My attorney a long time ago would say, hey, a good deal is where one person walks away and their arm isn't hurting, or their face isn't hurting because they got slapped. But on the bad side, let's go to if it turns out in a bad way, then we're looking at an increase in pricing. We're looking at an increase in inflation, which is going to be bad all around and could put us into a recession, guys, because these are the things when you start getting negative growth, all around GDP, that's the classic definition of a recession, and we want to avoid that at all costs. Yes, I understand that the Trump organization is trying to make the Trump presidency is trying to make its mark early and fast, which he said, none of this is a surprise, guys. He's been along. So nothing he's saying is out of the ordinary. Though I do say the Gaza thing took me a little bit by surprise. But, at the end of the day, it is money. We are talking about, if I'm an entrepreneur, like Trump is, if I'm an entrepreneur, good or bad, and we're making money, you're going to look good to the American people because we perceive we're making money.
Yeah. I mean, also, I kind of want to break these down because we have situations with now Canada, Mexico, China, and the EU, and I don't know, Vanuatu can not be far behind, right? So with Canada, I'm mystified because, there's, by all accounts, less than 1% of the fentanyl that enters the United States enters through Canada. And basically nobody's sneaking from Canada into the United States. Maybe 6 people. Just nobody. So what was that all about, really? What did Trump really, why is he messing with the Canadians? The Mexico thing, I understand. It's well established. Fentanyl, drugs, blah, 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 blah. Migration, I get it. That, I just don't get what that's about.
Well, it seems to me that what it's about is, once again, we started with Mexico. He's thinking, let's start with Mexico. Let's work with the war on drugs again. Going back to the classic Republican themes of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so Canada would be another way for Mexico, the cartels in Mexico, to start bringing and funneling in drugs. So they'd have ships or what have you go up to Vancouver, go up to the Northeast Corridor, and bring it down that way. So he's thinking, I'm gonna, or who knows what he's thinking, But like you said, Canada has no viable malfeasance at this point,
right.
To say, I think it's more important. Look,
it's like if I just started hitting my cat
Colombia.
It's like if I just started beating my cat over the head, he'd be so confused. He's like, I don't do anything wrong.
And this is a classic Trump move because he does the same thing all the time. He does the sensationalism, and then you have to ask yourself, well, okay, but what's really behind this? Because if you look, he already slapped a tariff on Colombia, all right, at 25%, which is a major drug haven. All right. So what we see is a precursor. We saw a precursor of Canada and Mexico at this particular point. But like you said, there's not too much to gain in Canada at this particular point. I think that he's sending the message out. Hey, the free ride is over. In his eyes, the free ride is over, but he doesn't realize that these tariffs are going to do more damage to us as a consumer than really help us. Back, let's go back to, let's just say the 1920s or 1910, when they started using, before the IRS was in vogue,
right.
Tariffs were the way that revenue was brought into the United States, right? You didn't have big government, so the Republicans,
you couldn't have big government because we didn't have enough revenue.
Of course. And they're thinking, hey, why don't we bring us back to those days? But a lot of times, we just have to point back to history. Smoot-Hawley Act, classic definition. They brought that act into play, slapped tariffs where you could, and it drove us depression. Okay, we were already in a depression. It made the situation even worse, and Hoover did nothing. So at this particular point, I'm scratching my head. Is this a warning to China and Russia? Russia really doesn't have any goods per se, on a large scale that they're bringing into us. But are we sending that shot across the bow saying, hey, here we are, remember who we are, and let's try to, understand each other better? And I think with China, it's more a piece of the pie.
It also feels like fighting the last war, right? Look, I'm from the Rust Belt. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. It's no place has been more devastated than Dayton, Ohio, by globalization and outsourcing and deindustrialization. So I have sympathy for protectionism. But that said, it feels like the horse has fled the barn. right? I mean, if tariffs might have had a place against like Japan for dumping steel in the 70s and 80s, for example, or for against China when China first was admitted to the WTO in the 80s and 90s, and they weren't admitting American goods, and we had a massive trade deficit. That probably would have been something that the Bush 1 and the Clinton administrations ought to have considered. But it just seems like now, I mean, I'm sorry, Dayton ain't never coming back, you know?
Neither is Pittsburgh.
Right.
You know, we're looking at the same scenarios here. You know, if you could imagine our special forces coming into a building to clear it out of bad guys, and the bad guys left 6 months ago.
Yeah, that is. I mean, at least Pittsburgh reinvented itself as a healthcare place. Yeah.
Oh, did it? So, Aquiles, I'm glad that you brought up China, because I pulled them up on the screen here, because we're talking mostly about Canada and Mexico for obvious reasons, right? There are immediate neighbors, and it's ironic because Trump is the one that tore apart the first NAFTA, made his USMCA, and then out of the blue said, I'm tearing that up. I'm going to start a trade war with our neighbors again. And then he threw in China for 10% tariffs. And then China, I mean, we all know, everybody in the United States, you don't have to be, a financial guru to know that the U.S. relies heavily on Chinese production of goods, of all the stuff that we use. So China does have the capacity and the power to slap back, right? And they did. And this is what it looks like. CBS here, showing 15% on coal, 15% on liquefied natural gas, 10% on crude, 10% ag machinery, 10% large engine cars. I mean, these are some of the things that the U.S. exports that China takes. China's not going to take this lying down. No one seems to be talking that much about the trade, the tariff war with China, because it's been ongoing ever since his first administration. Where do you see this going? Because China's obviously, they didn't respond this way the first time in Trump's first administration, but now they are. So how do you see that shaking out?
I think it's a preemptive strike on the part of the Chinese. And the second thing, like I said before, we got the sensationalism. The Chinese have made their move. Now we as the Americans are thinking, okay, well, the Chinese have a certain amount of goods and products that come in. But now in a roundabout way, Mexico has a lot more products coming to them. So, it's cheaper to produce similar in Mexico for exportation to the United States. So that's just one thing to consider. Back to your question, with the 15%, with the 10%, they are slapping that right back at us. We're going to be tit for tat with the Chinese. They didn't go as high as 20% because they have a lot more goods, to offer the United States. So they just went. I mean, the United States has more goods to offer as well to the Chinese. And honestly, the Chinese could be just shrugging their shoulders at this particular moment, saying, okay, 15, 10%, you come up to 20%, we'll take you up to 25%, and we're in a trade war.
This is like poker.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's worse than poker.
We're the ones paying for it, no?
That's right. And we are the ones who need to say to our government, hey, knock it off. Have a little bit more responsibility here. Can we let some more adults into the room? Can we form a bipartisanship to address these tariffs? Because this shouldn't be one person's idea alone. This should be a bipartisan approach, which hasn't been happening in over a decade, guys. The bipartisanship has been lacking severely. It used to be, if you look back to the Clinton days, when you had a Republican Congress and working with Clinton, the Speaker of the House talking, saying positive things. I don't see that leadership here in the current Congress, in the Senate and the Congress itself. So, the House. So my particular thoughts and feelings is, how difficult would it be to have everybody, including President Trump, get together in a spirit of governance and say, hey, let's make this happen. let's make it for the right reasons and happen, yeah, we need to get some more revenue in. Let's not kid ourselves. Yeah, but let's do this the right way. Let's not just be a petulant child say, we're going to slap you with tariffs and that's it. And you're going to fold because we're the United States.
Well, I feel like that kind of behavior has just been rewarded by the way Canada responded and by the way Mexico responded. I mean, right now, I have video here we can look at. Right now, there's literally Mexican troops being sent to the border. I think a lot of this is over by Tijuana. That they're moving there right now. I mean, they're literally shipping 10,000 border guards. I mean, aren't they folding to basically what Donald Trump wants? Because they're obviously trying to avoid this trade war, but at the same time, it's rewarding bad behavior. It's rewarding petulant, childish behavior.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, but we have to remember that the Mexican military is corrupt as sin. I mean, and
True.
unfortunately, a lot of there's a saying amongst Latinos that goes, "As Mexico, so does the rest of Latin America, Central and Latin America go." So, what you have to remember is at this point, Mexico is simply continuing the policies that AMLO started with of this capitulation to the United States. They were being tough on other things, but they have a new president. She's inexperienced dealing with a gentleman like this, in my opinion, and still showing force. I watched her press conference in Spanish the other day, and she made some really good points about the U.S. But at the same time, I think she's also showing that, hey, we're open to it. We're open to the possibility, but that doesn't mean we're just going to roll over on you. And that's what we have to remember. There are, the politicians in other countries like Canada, like Mexico, actually answer to the voters. All right, the voters will kick them out. I mean, I watched in one Latin American country, there was a pots and pans campaign where they were banging on pots every single day until they got what they wanted, and they did get what they wanted. It sounds funny, but the people forget, especially the citizens here, we forget the power that we have against the government. We just are apathetic in the sense to this. We can fight back, absolutely. We can pressure our congressmen and senators to make more responsible decisions. It's not just, hey, let's lay down, oh, it's too hard. No, it's not going to be that way. If you want true change in the government, and I'm not talking radical change, I'm just talking, hey, if we're going to all get along, we have to all agree, not just one side of the aisle.
Yeah, Americans like being keyboard warriors. I think a lot of it. The pots and pans thing. It's like, oh, that's novel. I hadn't thought about that. So
it's funny. That was Indians in Ecuador. They
Indian?
with the indigenous population. Yep, in Ecuador, marching on the Capitol, asking for the ouster of a president, and it became not just amongst them, but the entire population said, okay, enough's enough. And I think less than a month later, he was out.
Well, do you think this ties at all, Aquiles, with how Mexico is responding, ties into the mass deportations and stuff that Trump is now outlining and making good on, right? Like he had his envoy Granell going to Venezuela. President Maduro suddenly appears to be friendlier with the second Trump administration, saying, yeah, we'll take back 350,000 illegal migrants. Do you foresee that maybe this is part of the calculation with Trump and how he's throwing this tariff threat on Mexico based on the theory that you said, how Mexico goes, the rest of Latin America will go? Well, do you think this is, part and parcel of that maybe he's thinking, hey, Venezuela has a lot of oil. Hey, there's production capacity somewhere else in other parts of Latin America. So Mexico, you better get with it, or I'm going to go make best friends with Maduro right now.
That's absolutely true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. People also forget there is a huge oil cache in the Amazons. So the surrounding countries that the Amazons flows through, there is possibility for development there. All right, so that's another thing. A lot of people don't know that, by the way. So going back, yeah, we make the example with Mexico. Maybe something is happening under the table money-wise, guys, which would not be
Yeah.
unusual. We have paid off governments for many years down in Latin America. Just take a look at the Contras, with, Reagan. Also, there is another bad byproduct of this. Wanting people back to their countries, you're sending criminals as well, which we did before, and we're repeating that mistake because the MSs of the world came to being from Americans, not the country that they came from. As a matter of fact, the leadership of MS-13 was really more based in Los Angeles. When they got deported back to El Salvador, then all of a sudden the crime rate spiked. The government could not handle it, and took the extreme measures that they're taking right now, with the prison system. And, look at that. We got, Bukele, I believe is his name, came out
Really,
and
yeah.
said, we are going to offer money for U.S.
Oh, that's right.
immigrants from there.
Send us,
We're gonna,
send us your criminals. We'll
and how
house
much are
them.
you going to pay us? How much are you going to pay us, guys? Tell me that isn't corrupt as can be.
It's so insane.
And
I couldn't believe that when I heard
Good point.
that
That's
yesterday.
crazy.
And Trump's not like dismissing it out of hand.
oh no, it's too easy. When think about it this way: the current prison system in the United States, most of it is not private, because we saw that the private was keeping prisoners longer for profit, was doing things that were under the table that they shouldn't have been doing. Were getting paid. Judges were getting paid off for bringing more prisoners into that particular facility. This opens the door for even more corruption. So we need to watch this system. Get rid of the watchdogs, which Mr. Trump has done. Then how are we going to be vigilant on the prison systems? Absolutely not. I don't see it happening. So we as the people need to go to our congressmen, need to go to our senators and say, hey, if you let more private prisons into the system, we're going to have a whole lot more issues going forward.
Well, and then let's not even get into the 30 to 36,000 migrants that are being sent to Guantanamo Bay.
That's so crazy.
I mean, that's another cash cow, guys. Think about it. It's another cash cow.
It is.
It's going to cost however much it costs to house American prisoners here in the regular prison
$10,000 to $20,000 a year.
Yeah, I was going to say like somewhere around 30,000.
Depends on the state. Yeah,
per person. Yeah, roughly 20 to 30 grand per person per year. But being shipped out to Gitmo, where it's not U.S. territory, that's somebody's cash cow. For
well, it
sure.
is U.S. territory. Just to be clear here.
Technically, yeah, that's true. Technically, it is, but it's
devoid
of U.S.
Bush
laws.
Introduced this fiction. There's no place on the planet that is not subject to some kind of legal jurisdiction. And to say that like somehow Gitmo exists in some sort of netherworld that is neither Cuba nor the United States, nor who knows what it is, even international waters, you can't just like commit crimes. Okay.
Right. You can't just say it doesn't. Well, but that's because our government doesn't view it. They do view it as some sort of netherland, right? Like nowhere.
Trust me, that's not true. Like if you pick another Marines like pocket at Guantanamo Bay in the canteen, you're getting arrested. Okay,
but not what we do to the detainees, and that's my thing. Is like, okay, then how much can you charge per detainee? Because they're a quote illegal migrant. How much can you charge per head? And how much per guard per head, per hour, per whatever. What are they eating? The food has to get shipped in. That is a whole micro economy in and of itself. And
Mhm.
wow, I feel like Bukele knew that, and that's why he is like, hey, bring them
It's
here.
also humanitarian abuse, if you think about it, because
Oh,
how
for
are
sure.
families going to visit their loved
Yes.
ones in prison down there? How are they going to do it, in the other countries if we start exporting prisoners? And less chance for appeal, less chance. What are you going to have an
Yes.
appeal system down there that we're paying for? Guess what? That's an added expense. That's more money that we're paying out of pocket. Do you
Good
really
point.
want to go down that rabbit hole?
Good
Yeah.
point. There's money in all of this, Aquiles. Like, I'm glad that you brought that
Always
up
money.
because everything, the tariffs, it's always all about money. Even the whole prisoner, this, we like to think that the trade war, tariffs, all of this stuff has nothing to do, that it's totally disconnected from immigration. It's not. It's not. This is, I mean, especially if you look at it from the Latin American standpoint and what Trump is trying to do with deportations, they are interconnected. And I think it's inextricable. And then you view it even further. God, when you think about the prison system, it's mind blowing. It's always always the money.
Aquiles, let me ask you about sort of the unemployment picture, right? I mean, there's literally no more important economic indicator than employment, and it's I mean, it seems that the Trump administration is kind of counterbalancing two contrarian impulses. I mean, tariffs are likely to increase inflation and therefore reduce employment, cause some businesses to go under, cause some people to hire less. And we already kind of don't have, we have low unemployment, but we don't have vigorous hiring, which is kind of, so people are kind of stuck. On the other hand, you also have this mass deportation idea, which I guess will reduce unemployment because it will create, people will be removed from where they're working and will be sent out of the United States. Is that, do you think, what Trump is sort of thinking, that these two things will kind of cancel each other out and he won't be dealing with a high unemployment situation for very long? Or is this really just like, I'm a lame duck, I have 4 years to go, I can't be reelected, I don't care?
I think it might be a bit of both, but let's. You brought up an interesting point. When we talk about unemployment, everybody knows the Fed, as far as their job is to help with the interest rates, but the second job that they monitoring is the unemployment, then trying to help towards that end. That's one of the two main mandates that the Fed has. Now, if you start deporting people as they've been doing, the question now becomes, who does that job? We do not have the capacity for that low-level migrant worker here in the
Mm-hmm.
United States. Anybody who says otherwise is a fool. Now, if you think that Americans are going to take those jobs, let me tell you, it's backbreaking, it's difficult, and pays hardly anything. The
Mm-hmm.
reason being is that when the migrant workers are working, they are working in the field that they do. I believe the movie McFarlane explained it best, where they get paid per field that they do throughout the day.
Wow.
So going back to that, there's not even a living wage that we're talking about there. Migrants tend to have to put all their resources together in order to make a somewhat living, and with the hope that their children will do better. But let's
Yes.
go back to other parts of unemployment. If we look at the unemployment numbers, they didn't really change significantly. It was more or less what was anticipated. And even with what the Fed's doing right now, the big thing that's occurring is that housing prices are going up. The loans, personal business loans, are going up. Why is that happening? There's a lack. We need to concentrate on building more housing. We need to concentrate on lowering the interest rates, not, I think the Fed has been right all along about the interest rates, but I think they could have been a little bit more aggressive when they first started this. And I think they spooked everybody. The Fed did spooked everybody by saying, we're going to stop this year. We were all hot and bothered when we said that, oh, wow, the interest rates are going down. That's great. We're going to have a party. And, it doesn't work that way. As a matter of fact, it went the opposite direction, where you had the interest rates go in the mortgage arena. The interest rates are at 7% right now when it was at 5% before. But we forgot. We were at 11% just a year ago, last August.
Wow.
So we have to remember, let's put things in perspective. If seeing interest rates going down, if the Fed regains its senses, according, to everybody out there, because it doesn't make sense to stop now. But hindsight 2020, it could make sense. The problem is the market doesn't like it. No market likes uncertainty. The second part is that it does not stimulate more growth in the economy, hence the tariffs. This is a strategy they're taking because there's not much that can be done. As you mentioned, Ted, there's not a heck of a lot that's going to come out of this. But let's see what we can do to stir the pot, and let's see what we can do to have somewhat set up for the next Republican challenge. Because that's what I see.
Do you think, Aquiles, that Trump imposing these random tariffs out of the blue, do you think part of that was his play to kind of like a cudgel on Jerome Powell?
It's funny. He has really no power over Jerome Powell. The Fed is independent. You got 12 governors who.
Well,
really
USAID used to be independent too.
Yeah, well, that's a different scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, they can cut off funding to any agency.
Given that he doesn't, I mean, exactly, the Fed is different. So since he has no actual power over Jerome Powell, maybe he figures if he can, like you said, stir the pot in the economy by tariffs, that Jerome Powell will then be forced to respond. Maybe?
It is a possibility. All right. But here, I would
he is
submit
a
this
madman, Donald Trump. So,
like, hate, or what have you, let's look at Jerome Powell. This is a gentleman who's been right more than wrong. And people do not sympathize with the losing side. They are going to sympathize with the winning side, because the winning side has kept us in this expansionist mode for more than a decade. We have not seen a real contraction in the market till this month. I was talking about this on another media last month. I said, we are going to see a rough first quarter because they haven't seen that hard of a correction. Now, with the absence of correction, whenever the correction does happen, it's infinitely worse because we haven't seen that control occurring. We need to have pauses in the market. We just saw one recently, so that was good. But we need to have pauses in the market for it to go back. It consolidates, it moves sideways, and then all of a sudden it starts grabbing it, going up. That's an efficient market, guys. That's how we make more money in the United States, and that's how these big companies can offer their CEOs tons of money. So, going back to the Fed and the unemployment is controlled still at this point. The Fed interest rate, I foresee them having to do something in the latter part of this year, because the Fed doesn't care what Trump says. They just don't. They're going to say, unless there's some imaginary thing that comes out and say, aliens say, you better lower rates. You better lower the rates and stuff, then that's a different animal. But in absence of aliens, the Fed is going to do what the Fed wants. They are independent. They are 12. I mean, imagine there are conservative and liberal members of this board of governors, opinions ranging from the ridiculous to the absolute super conservative. So, and you have a governor, the head, Powell, who is not hawkish at all. As a matter of fact, he's more dovish, more soft stand on the particular matters of the day, an adult in the room, in my opinion. And there are 12 of them, and they are making ideas that at this point, they've been right a lot more than they've been wrong. The president is simply using the power of what I call moral suasion in order to sway public opinion towards, hey, maybe the Fed should be doing something. And the truth of the matter, the person who says that doesn't know what the heck they're talking about generally.
Yeah, Jerome Powell's like, whatever, I'm not listening. I don't care. So
He's drinking his smooth.
that's true. He just really didn't care. I mean, look at when Trump came in the first time, because Jerome Powell was still there, and mortgage rates were still hovering near zero in the first Trump term, right? And people were saying Powell needs to raise the base rate. He's sitting on zero for too long. And he just kept sitting there. And he was like, don't care.
And
I
he
don't
was
know
right.
if that he was right. Do you think that proved to be a good thing?
Yeah. For that particular point in time. Sometimes the best move, and I just know this as a money manager, the best move is not to take action. Sometimes it's the best because long term, and these guys aren't thinking 2 months in advance. These guys are thinking years on how things will affect the U.S. economy. I think that a lot of people, the general public, forget that the economy moves in cycles, and we've had this huge expansion tract for over a decade. And it'll have to start contracting at some point. The question is, we talk hard or soft landing. That's not the most important thing, because when it starts, it's not going to be pretty. It's going to be ugly. I've seen this with the market. Once you start seeing the economy moving in that direction, then it's all bets are off. And you're going to start seeing a lot of panicking. You're going to see a lot of businesses folding because they were not aptly prepared. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but at some point, we're going to have to, move into that market cycle where we were all this up, and everything, and we're going to have to start going downward, and then kind of leveling off before we can go back up. All right, that's just simple market.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're going to see a lot of pain this first quarter. So, I mean, I don't want it to be the case, but I think you're right. And then hopefully, I don't know, once we see the pain, then what? Are we going to level out this year, or are we going to keep going down through the year?
No, we're going to keep going up. It's going to be the opposite. Yeah, we're going to go back up again. But the only kink in the armor at this particular point, and we've talked about this, is the cost of living, the food pricing right now.
Yeah.
The food pricing keeps going up and up and up, and there seems to be no leveling off at this particular point. I always give the example of the Chinese or the Korean stores with the rice, 25-pound bag, the bags of rice at 25 pounds. Now, what a lot of people don't realize, those prices move up and down all the time. So just the other day, I drove by a place and I saw it at $24.99. Yet I went to another store, and the other store had it for $27.99. And then another store had it for $23.99. So there's a lot of movement. There's a lot of fluidity that's occurring in these commodity markets per se, and which has no correlation to the market, the stock market at all, and more to do with supply and demand, which is the true measure of the cost of goods at this particular point.
Yeah, very good. We're absolutely going to have you back, obviously, as the market keeps moving and shaking, and who knows, God only knows
Quaking.
What the orange man, twerking, the orange man in the White House, what he's going to do, and changes.
No twerking, no market twerking.
Oh,
please.
God. No, I had it in my head, Trump twerking, and I went, oh, God.
Get that out of my head.
I don't know how I'm going to sleep tonight thinking about that.
I don't. Okay, sorry. We'll get that out of our heads. Aquiles, appreciate you coming on and breaking all of this stuff down for us. Of course, Aquiles Larrea is the CEO and founder of Larrea Wealth Management. He is the author of the book Your Money and You, the ultimate guide for Latino entrepreneurs. But I would argue it's for all entrepreneurs.
Before I forget, I have a new book out. It's called Wise Up With Your Money. It just came out now.
Congratulations.
It's on Amazon.
Let's
It's
show
on
the link.
Apple. It's on all the things.
Let me
the
look it up.
picture you
What's
see
it called?
behind me, it's called Wise Up With Your Money. It's on Amazon. It's on Apple. It's on all the major retailers. It is more geared towards the American consumer. And we have an audiobook. We have all the wonderful stuff.
Wow.
We do everything, when we come out with these books. The first one was great for the good for anybody, like you said.
Good name.
Wise Up With Your Money, right there. It's available on Amazon. You just published it, so it's fresh off the press. So go check it out right there.
Hot off the press.
Hot off the presses. Thank you, Aquiles. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.